There's this sense of uncertainty coming out of COVID. We're not sure how to pinpoint exactly what it is that God is wanting for us. I'd suggest go easy on yourself, because all the prophets in the land weren't able to predict that COVID was coming. It's difficult for us to look forward too far into the future, but we do it with a sense of anticipation nonetheless. I wonder what would have happened if we embarked on this sort of an exercise, say in 1990, going back a long time now. And for me, it was an exciting year. I had just begun full-time teaching, 22, not a care in the world. I just finished a youth camp where a number of young people had given their lives to Christ and gotten baptized. I was full of energy, stepping up in the local church, wanting the kingdom to advance. And on top of that, Collingwood won the premiership. I mean, what more could you want? But I was oblivious to a lot of the changes that were going on in the world. Changes affecting the church that we now get the benefit of seeing as we look back. In 1990, we saw the world recovering from the collapse of the Berlin Wall and just wondering what was happening to communism. There are all sorts of world and global factors that affected the church, but more specifically, we saw the end of the charismatic renewal. We saw some high-profile Christian leaders fall, and a new cynicism started to creep into the church. But on our own shores, we had the rise of Youth Alive and Hillsong that was significantly impacting the way that we were doing worship on Sundays. And yet at the same time, people were starting to turn up less often than ever before because of Sunday trading. And with all these changes, seeds were being sown for impact on the church, whether we liked it or not. We now have the benefit of looking back some 3.5 decades to seeing what it was that was unfolding. I know you might find it hard to believe, but I was actually around at the time, and I, perhaps like you, didn't see what was coming. So I wonder if, as we look back, as we consider what God was doing, there's not perhaps the benefit of hindsight that's made us wiser, and yet we are perhaps none the wiser as we look forward. We want to be God's prophetic voice, his agents to shape and develop new leaders. But what does it actually look like? Well, fortunately, a great many of us are doing wonderful work in this space. We've seen some exciting track records unfolding, great fruit, growth and expansion. And it's exciting, but we sometimes feel uncomfortable with what change requires of us. Of course, one of the classic studies in change was the adaptation or lack thereof of Kodak, wanting to keep selling film cameras in the belief that perhaps to face up to the digital change that was coming was too hard. We've never done it that way before, people said. One of the Kodak employees in the 1970s wrote a report, and he said that he believed digital cameras would be the only cameras that people were buying by 2010, and he wasn't far wrong. So I'd ask, who are the prophetic voices we should be listening to today? Who are the people with a voice in the midst of upheaval or uncertainty? Who are the people that are speaking as the mouthpiece of God about change and its impact on the church? It's been easy for many of us to revert back to what's always worked, and that ain't bad. But what's new and what's still coming? What is God saying to you? How do you hold lightly that which you have and consider that which could be coming and which could be better? Our best tomorrow needs our best efforts today, whatever our yesterday has been. And I know some of you sit with this uncertainty of change as you look at the disappointments, the letdowns, the discouragements. It's very easy to retreat, to recoil, to perhaps wonder if your best days are behind you. And I'm here to encourage you that your best days are still ahead if you would seize a hold of God's plan for your life, your church, your agency, your ministry. We have to believe that our best days are still ahead. There is so much more to do. There is a bigger and wider world of people yet to come to Christ. And as the target is busier and bigger and more expansive, it just simply becomes easier for us to hit. Is God preparing you as his arrow to be fired at the targets you see all around you? I want to believe that despite the fact that I'm not as young as I was in 1990, God's still got my best days ahead. There is still so much more for me and you to do. And yet it's sad that whilst we recognise the need to shape leaders, the need to invest in people, we recognise the need to sow our character and our heart into the people who are yet to come, who God is raising up. The leaders and the church planters of tomorrow are the people sitting under our influence today. There are still some people who are making fateful decisions that will cripple the future of their churches because we've never done it that way before. Who are the people around you that are the voices of encouragement rather than the voices that are playing it safe, the voices that might be holding you back? There are people who made decisions back in 1990 that led to the eventual closure of their churches, that led to ministries not flourishing, people not being deployed. And God forbid that that should happen on our watch, while we have a moment in time, an opportunity to seize, seeing what God will do as we get over the disappointments and discouragements. We overlook the yesterdays in the strength and the power of God, who by his Spirit is helping us to seize the present with our best efforts today. That is what our tomorrow needs. And God is wanting through us to plant more seeds, to see a greater harvest reaped. And as that happens, we are building our best future now. The best future that we could possibly imagine, it is being built through our efforts now. Let us seize the moment that God has given us on our watch together as a family of believers. It's important to recognise, of course, though, that there's quite a bit of difference. There's difference in our midst which enriches us. Wouldn't it be a shame if we all looked the same? It would be so unexciting. It's important that we can learn from each other, that we can grow on account of what others are able to open our eyes to. Sometimes we need to recognise what's not working, though, and we need to learn from people who are friends and colleagues in ministry who've got so much to enrich us with. I trust that you've come to this summit to listen, but also to be listened to. Believe that God will use some individual conversations that you have that'll be strategic, not just for yourself, but for the others you speak to. We know that there must be people here today who are contemplating giving up, who are considering how tough it's been and wondering whether you should be passing the baton more quickly than you'd imagined. But what if your response was one of openness to say, Lord, speak to me. I need to be prepared to do something different. We celebrate the difference that may be yet to come, just as much as we also celebrate the difference that is. But could I suggest that in respecting the difference that God has called us to, there are some times, there are some seasons in which our right to be different can actually interfere with what needs to be better. And it's hard for us to sit with complete objectivity, to know what we should cling to because God has spoken in times past. We want to wait in faithfulness. We want to surrender to him and say, Lord, I believe that you're not done with this idea, with this call just yet. But on the other hand, are there some aspects to the call that need tweaking? Are there wholesale adjustments because of what COVID has spelled out for the church and its online demands? It takes wisdom to know the difference, and wisdom that we gain as we position ourselves at the feet of friends, colleagues, sometimes external voices who can speak to us with the precision that we need. Sometimes it costs money. Sometimes it costs time that we don't think we have. But it's that spirit of a lifelong learner that we need, that considers what it means for our best days to yet be ahead of us. Of course, what binds us together is our common faith in the Lordship of Jesus Christ. 2 Corinthians 5:21, one of my favourite verses in the New Testament. God made him, Jesus, who had no sin of his own, didn't have to die for any wrongdoing on his part. That qualified him to be sin for us, so that in him we might find a new identity. We might discover freedom from sin. Sin being at its most basic form, separation from God. We come into relationship with God, and through Jesus, we are made right with the Father. I wonder what that could look like as we preach it boldly, courageously, and clearly, so that people under our influence would yet come to faith in greater number than we've ever seen before. Also in Philippians 2:13, we have to know that it's God who is still at work in us, to will and to act in order to fulfill his good purpose. Is there a good purpose in your life, in your ministry? Is that good purpose one of impact that is still to be felt in many more people yet? Wouldn't we want to believe so? Wouldn't we want to see our preferred future now? As we invest into people, as we continue faithfully in what God has called us to, as we're trying out new ideas, as we're recruiting new people to step out with new ministry and mission ventures. I'm excited about 2024, and I'm excited about what it's setting up for a bold new future for all of us to step into. We celebrate what stays the same as much as we face what needs to be different. And it's not easy to do this because some of the pressures and the discouragements are very real. Some things seem sincerely to be holding us back. But I've learned, and maybe I'm a slow learner, but I've learned sometimes to sit back and rather than agitate and push to change circumstance, to get on my knees and ask, Lord, what are you doing in the midst of this? What are you trying to do in me? How are you trying to shape my obedience? How are you trying to lead me perhaps to some others who yet need the best that I've got to offer? They haven't even begun the journey. Young people need your input. People younger than you, because you're all young, right? But there are people around us who are young and need someone to believe in them and to say that church is not on the decline. It's facing its best season. To say, I'm privileged to be a partner in the cause of the gospel. To get excited on behalf of other churches when you see people coming to faith and talk that story up in your own. Being a positive influence means sometimes seeing with great optimism and delight what God is doing not only in your own part of the world, but in the world of others. Well, let's have a look at our purpose as a movement. This has been our purpose for some years now, crystallized very clearly and deliberately to say that we are a movement of the people of God gathering in and around the central figure of Jesus Christ, empowered by the Holy Spirit, living out his way in our neighbourhoods and inviting others to do the same. That's pretty good, isn't it? What we have in common, Jesus, the power of the Spirit, that optimism to look at continuing to reach more people. What are we actually doing about that collectively? I'm glad you asked. Firstly, we decided a couple of years ago, right in the midst of COVID, with staff, with the board, with many people I spoke to across the movement, there was a need to inject fresh vision. There was a need to release some strategic planning, not to wave documents before people and ask for conformity, not to impose a vision on local churches, but simply to cast vision and say that because of our common purpose, because of who we are together, we identified 4 strategic directions that we believed were important for the first half of this decade. Firstly, strengthening communities. The importance of us being stronger because of the way in which we're able to invest in order to be better. Supporting growing churches was an initiative that most of you have heard about. It started to offer consultancy support to churches where there would be accountability for change in ministry cohorts. We've had 14 cohorts of ministers gathering together, tabling statistics, reports of changes, and what's come as a result of the consultancy visit. And of course, for all sorts of reasons, some of those consultancies work better than others. Sometimes we need to have multiple voices before we really hit our sweet spot. But we're really positive about the fact that this kind of support has been helping a number of churches. Some have gone to external consultants and sought out other voices that have been helping them enormously. And I know one of our churches just recently had somebody flying in for a repeat visit because they're seeing benefit in what comes. And we can obviously provide some context later as needed. Even with governance support. I don't know how many churches I've talked to about their constitution, just offering some thoughts around how it could be better and stronger. But ultimately, as churches budget to take that to lawyers and accountants where needed, to see the strength of the church flourish even more, that investment into professional expertise helps governance. It helps us to do better at what some of us, frankly, were not always wired to do. Some of us would put our hand up and say, I didn't come into ministry to be poring over policies and constitutions, but we've got to be responsible leaders. So let's get the expertise in, and in some cases that'll come from the Churches of Christ office, but reach out to your friends in ministry. There are many good ideas out there. As we see communities strengthened, it kind of forces us to ask the question, who could I turn to for help in strengthening my work? Who could you turn to that could give help to your church to help you face the things that are not always exciting, that are not always in your wheelhouse, but could make you better? It'd be really good to think about too the grants that have been made available that have helped some churches. I think of Hobart City and also Northern Community Church, who've been able to benefit from the Thread Together program and to provide clothing for people in need. It's just such a powerful way of connecting with people in the local community, striking up conversations, building links, and altruistically providing for very real needs. That comes as communities are strong. There are more ideas and more mission ventures, more countries reached, more churches planted when the local church gets stronger. And when the local church gets stronger, its mission gets better. And there are countless stories in this room, many examples of where that is applied. Our second strategic direction that we put out there nearly 4 years ago now was that of inspiring leadership, recognising that a strong leadership pipeline is needed in every church and agency. It's needed throughout our movement. And it's not just about passing the baton. We don't just look for leaders when we're coming up to retirement. Leadership development is our lifelong call. It is the extension of our discipleship that sees us tapping on the shoulders of new people, young and old, and daring to speak prophetically into their lives with some possibilities, some hope, some opportunities to step up and serve. I mean, goodness knows we'll return to our churches this week and have a ton of those conversations, believing in someone, encouraging them to enroll in a Bible college course, giving them an opportunity to join a team. What could that tap on the shoulder look like for you again this week? As you link it to the need to develop a leadership pipeline, again, so that your church can be better. Again, so that you seize the ideal dreams and vision of the future now. We've got one United College, isn't that exciting? Having both ACOM and Sterling merged together so that there is one affirmed, accredited pathway that we can offer to all our churches. We'll hear from Neil Meredith, the principal, a bit later today and tomorrow. But enrolments have increased already. We want to believe there'll be more of that next year. There's also a professional development pathway that CCVT has offered that's unaccredited. And it has seen close to 50 new people coming into fully endorsed, ordained ministry within the Churches of Christ for the duration of this strategic plan. I reckon that's pretty exciting, given what we might compare it to in years past. Providing multiple pathways is about offering you, right on your doorstep, the opportunity to help partner with others to recruit more people, to multiply leadership and see the kingdom advance. We've got coaching as part of the deal. And again, we've provided a coaching framework that is for the use in the local church. It's not up to the CCVT office or some other church to tell you how to coach your own people, simply to offer the tools that are going to help you to do it better. So I'd ask the question, who might God be calling you to raise up? Who that you have not yet reached needs your tap on the shoulder? What kind of ministry outlets need your input? Have a think about church planting. Could it be a possible church planter that you don't want to lose, that's doing a great job supporting your ministry locally, that you, on the other hand, can release either to a mono-ethnic church service on your own premises or to another part of the world, in Victoria or Tasmania perhaps? We've even got one church that's planted in Queensland. Isn't it exciting to see that as we give our best away, God raises up more people? We think of the verse that Paul spoke in regard to finance. God gives seed to the sower. But it's not just money. It's the people who are already sowing and are sowing leaders out that God is giving more seed to. More seeds that need to be watered and planted. You think of the 10 church plants that have come out of CCVT since we started this strategic plan. 2 are from large churches, 2 from relatively large ones with monocultural services that they've commenced. There's several that have been planted by new individuals and small teams, but there's multiple styles. It's not one size fits all. It's about saying yes to what God is doing uniquely through us and believing that it'll still bear fruit, that there is fruit yet to be born from the new ideas that you sow as a result of this week. Why not talk to Brighton Beach Church of Christ as an example of one of these new church plants? Or perhaps, as you saw in the video before, Cross Culture Tarneet. 2 different styles, 2 different starting stories, but churches that have grown to 100 and beyond very quickly. Why not find out their recipe for success? You don't have to adapt it wholesale, but you might be inspired by what you hear. Just as you'll be inspired by others you speak to. Be quicker to listen, to ask, tell me a story. What's God doing? And see how he gets your attention this next couple of days. The 3rd strategic direction, empowering mission. This is surely an everybody thing already. But as we develop mission plans, we don't just have nice little documents that list our aspirations. We don't just write down the programs that we're putting in place. A mission plan is something that strategically develops leaders and volunteers. It's the ideas in writing that you're putting into practice to see more people mobilised and recruited, and it's the how-to that explains what you're intending over the next couple of years. It's been great reading some of the ones that we've received as we've tried to help churches think through the benefit of systems that can make what they do better. Effective systems are critical to automating the sorts of practices that can be replicated through others and can see growth in ways that are just not possible if everything falls at the feet of the senior pastor. If your church is, say, 150 people, and it's been that way for a long time, could it be that there's reasons why growth has been curtailed that might have something to do with the lack of some systems that, if they were implemented, could help other people take a lot of pressure off you? Over the next few months, we're going to try and call some pastors in that kind of size grouping together to discuss what God is already doing, what he could do differently and better in your world. We've been meeting regularly with groups of pastors of different sizes. We'd love to continue offering that far and wide, so let us know if you'd like to talk to some other people. Effective mission, though, can only be as strong as the systems it's built on. If you've got a ceiling on your systems, there'll be a ceiling on your growth. There'll be a ceiling on your finances. There'll be a ceiling on the outreach that you're wanting to enact. So, what are the systems God is wanting to build that will serve your mission? Why not talk to Montrose Church of Christ as an example of a turnaround church that was facing the real possibility of closure at some point in the near future when I visited several years ago. And whilst there can be a luck factor and there can be certain local causes of success and growth, I can tell you one of the things that impressed me was the line in the sand moment of the senior leaders of the church saying, we are not going to keep doing things the way we've done them before. Things are going to be different around here. And it's just that shift and decision to do a few things differently, to reach out for help, that has seen the average age significantly lower in the congregation, in the band. The song choices are different. There's the sound of young children in the church. The baptism tank is not being used for floral arrangements anymore. It's actually being used to baptise people. I reckon that's pretty exciting. All right, what about the 500 or so baptisms that we've seen right across our churches just in the last year alone? That's pretty good, isn't it? And almost 500 people who therefore are sincerely committing their lives to Christ, taking that next step, and are continuing as disciples in local churches. Why not talk to Berwick Church of Christ here, who are seeing dozens of people baptised throughout the year on multiple occasions? Find out what they do. Talk to other people with the success stories that you see on Facebook posts. Follow them up, and let's see more and more people come to an abiding faith in Christ. Well, the fourth and final of our strategic directions has been that of resourcing growth. And this is a difficult one in some ways because the resourcing happens locally in large part. We'd love to chat to you, and I'm sure many other churches would love to help you too, to think about how the fundraising could happen better. What are some of the things that might be blind spots that could be overcome? But what about considering just simple maintenance plans, putting into effect a plan to look after your worship facility? What about also transforming the existing spaces that you have, freshening them up, tidying them? That doesn't cost much money. Some churches have needed to think about renting new premises because it gives them more options than what they have, perhaps renting a school or an RSL hall. There are all sorts of opportunities to talk through and work through, but why not also consider talking to the Properties Corporation if you have a facility that can perhaps be expanded or improved? What about an example of a joint venture where you don't just do it on your own, but you work in partnership to see things happen that might not otherwise be possible? How might God be inviting you to strategize or improve your ministry space? Have a conversation with Steeple about how it is that they've been able to add new facilities to the old Baldwin Church of Christ premises. It's a great story that's still unfolding. What about considering this one we've talked about before, but Open Door up at Monbulk don't even have their own church facility, but they've got an op shop, which is bringing in not only a lot of foot traffic and people to have conversations with, but a lot of dollars to support the ministry. This began when one member of a local church one day decided that something needed to be done in this town and that young people needed to be reached, and they started a youth group upstairs in that building. That's been going solidly for decades now. And the person who the vision started with was Dean Phelan, who went on to become the executive officer of the Churches of Christ in Queensland. Tiny little church of about 40 people. Maybe there's a Dean Phelan sitting in your midst. Maybe there's somebody there with the ideas that can be deployed. Because raising up new missionaries and ministers is not about having people only serve the local church on the premises that you meet in on Sunday. It's about also mobilising and deploying them right through the week with ideas that they will get excited about. They're going to see the resources flow because money follows vision. And as the vision burns brighter, as you get more and more excited about sowing vision to others, help catalyse and release the people who are going to build your future now. Let me close with a passage from Matthew 9. It's a few verses that talk about Jesus' ministry, and yet it models to us, I think, these 4 strategic directions. Jesus went through all the towns and villages, teaching in their synagogues, proclaiming the good news of the kingdom and healing every disease and sickness. Effective mission. Mission with signs and wonders following. Mission that might see justice enacted in our local communities, but might see us stepping into some unfamiliar territory, doing the work of an evangelist or a healer where there are needs presenting themselves. When he saw the crowds, he had compassion on them because they were harassed and helpless, like sheep without a shepherd. Strengthening communities means we still need to love on the sheep, but that's not all we do. And then he said to his disciples, the harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. Ask the Lord of the harvest, therefore, to send out workers into his harvest field. That's speaking right there of the leadership pipeline that awaits our best efforts. And of course, the resourcing of it all. Jesus spoke more about finance than just about any other subject. I wonder what God might be saying to you this week, what God might be calling to you beyond today. Could I affirm the wonderful work that's already happening? I'm so proud to lead in a movement like this with people of great courage and conviction, but our best days are yet ahead. God bless you. Enjoy the day.